2017, the Libertarian Union was formed. Finally, the average Joe Libertarian could find a thriving community of independent podcasters and content providers, all in one convenient location. At Libertarian Union, we'll always have the latest news, interviews, discussions, and even movie reviews. With hundreds of episodes and more added all the time, you'll always find something fresh at libertarianunion.com.
All right. Let's get fired up here.
Maximum freedom. Read.
Stay on target.
Maximum freedom.
Stay on target.
Maximum freedom. Read Rothbard.
Well, hello and welcome to the Actual Anarchy podcast, the podcast where we talk about movies from a Rothbardian and Anarcho-Capitalist perspective. And tonight we're going to talk about a movie that Robert came up to view in my home, or my man cave, actually. It's called Green Room. It's a Patrick Stewart movie. Came out a couple of years ago, and it has some interesting themes. Robert took 3 whole notes, handwritten, and we'll have plenty of content for you tonight. This is episode 98, and the show notes and more can be found at actualanarchy.com/98. How you doing, Robert?
Hey, buddy. How are ya? You're looking good.
Thank you. You like my lengthy, luscious, luxurious hair?
Your long flowing locks. Are
Yeah,
you growing them out in the hope that like some knight is going to save you out of your giant tower?
That was one of the hopes, yes. And then I was actually thinking when you were on your way to visit us that the first thing you would do would look at me and just laugh for at least a good minute, because you've never seen my hair this long. And I've
in
known
the
you
entire lifetime of lifetimes that we have lifetime together, that is very true. You've always been high and tight or middling, normal man cut. You've never gone for the full-on transitioning or whatever it is you're doing.
I feel like I'm going to do the tuck dance from Silence of the Lambs just for you.
Why wouldn't you? I don't know. It seems to be well within your character at this point.
Right. Well, I just, I wanted to grow it out and see what happens while I still have the ability to grow hair.
That is, I can see the appeal of that. Yeah, sure.
Getting on in the years now, and if I don't do it now, it's not going to happen. So
you're not going to be some wild, crazy, woolly old man with just everything, long hair, long beard, one tooth.
Then I could invent the toothbrush. Yeah, I could do that.
Okay.
And that would be personal property, Robert, the toothbrush.
Oh, so you're going to go crazy commie when you get old?
Yeah,
it's a natural progression.
Get senile.
Yeah, well, you're going to get senile, and then you're also going to get less and less able to compete in the market. So you're going to want to get bailed out by your commie friends. So I can see that.
All right, yeah. So we're going to be talking about some commies, I think, in this in the show tonight on Green Room.
Yeah, they're not overt commies, but I don't know how else you would describe them, really.
Yeah, they're. I'll pause it to you during the show a little bit.
Pause it all you want.
But what else can we say to our Actual Anarchy audience other than we appreciate you guys? And if you want to support us and what we do here on the Patreons, we got a few people watching right now who do support us at the $10 a month level. So thank you guys for that. And the link for that is actualanarchy.com/Patreon. So if you want to get in on watching us live or still have access to the live stream later on, you also get the entire behind the scenes after editing. You get early access, and you can join our little club in the Facebook group, Actual Anarchy. What is it called? The cadre, the
Island of Sanity, Daniel.
Island of Sanity in the Facebook Asylum. Yes, the Actual Anarchy cadre. See, I don't even remember the names of these things anymore. I am getting old. It's a problem.
Your name is Daniel. We do a show. Continue.
All right, and my name is now Mud. Well, let's get into the Last Nighters portion of the show. Do. Hey everyone, welcome back to The Last Nighters. It's Daniel and Robert. We are The Last Nighters, and this is going to be episode 41. You can find the show notes and more at thelastnighters.com/41. We're going to be talking about Green Room, And before we get into the Google description, let's say hello to Robert real quick before we kick this thing off.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another show. Happy to be here. Feeling good. Got a lot of juice. We did the show specifically today because I've got more juice for you. So let's see how that pans out.
Yeah, Robert's got more juice and I can move more freely now. I had tweaked my back a little bit and I thought that if we tried to record a day or two ago, I'd be crying on air. It'd be great. So, shall we get into that Google description?
We need to schedule the show around Daniel's aging body, his decrepit crapitude. We're sorry.
I keep just falling apart day by day. It's going to be like Weekend at Bernie's around here before we know it. All right. Green Room came out 2015. It's a mystery crime / horror. An hour and 35 minutes, 7.1 on the IMDb, 90% Rotten Tomatoes, 79% Metacritic, and 83% on the Google users liking the movie. The description is a punk rock band becomes trapped in a secluded venue after finding a scene of violence. For what they saw, the band themselves become targets of violence from a gang of white power skinheads who want to eliminate all evidence of the crime. Came out on tax day 2016. Director Jeremy Saulnier on a budget of $5 million and the box office a whopping $3.8 million.
Ouch. Didn't even make its little money's back.
That's got to sting a little bit.
I don't know if you would call it a mystery. I mean, I know it's throwing a bunch of slashes in there, mystery / horror / crime.
It's a fusion movie.
But what mystery was there? Usually when I think of a mystery, I think of a protagonist solving some sort of a mystery. I mean, I guess, but the whodunit of the murder is just told immediately. We know why the skinhead people lock the people in the room. And then the reveal that they have a drug operation going on there adds zero to the plot. I mean, there's no, it's not like, oh, they had to kill them because there's a drug operation. No, they're killing them because they saw the murder. That's, I mean, maybe it adds a little. No, I don't even think it does. I think it's just a little add thing to show how bad these people are or something, because not only are they like neo-Nazi skinhead guys, they also do drugs and sell drugs. And
have a Confederate flag on their wall.
And listen to punk music. But then the heroes also listen to punk music and sing punk music, but they sing punk music that hates skinheads. So there's like two punk factions colliding in this movie.
Yeah, it is weird. All right, my premise of my theory here is that this is like the election of 2016, the lead up to it in the DNC. This is the Hillary supporters versus the Bernie supporters.
Okay, go ahead. I want to hear this.
And the dead girl must have had evidence that could have led to the arrest of Hillary.
Okay, I see that.
And so they stab her in the brain with like a knife, right? Now, I'm going to say that the Nazis are the Hillary supporters and the ANCOMs are the Bernie supporters. The band is the Bernie supporters. And essentially, they both align in a lot of ways in their tactics, in their philosophies, in their economic ideas. Like the band was, siphoning gas, stealing from people. The writer of the film or the director, he was in the punk scene in Washington, D.C. growing up. And in one of the interviews, he talked about how he thought it was exploitation for a venue to offer tickets to the band that the band would then have to sell to fill the venue. And we can get into that because I think that that's not a situation of exploitation at all. But you've basically got two groups of people who have very similar views in a lot of ways. Just one is overt racist and the other is more covert racist, like under the surface racist, like the racist of trying to look down upon people in order that they may try to lift them up, albeit via social programs that inevitably fail and exacerbate problems.
Right, I believe that's called the soft bigotry of low expectations.
Right, and that's the Hillary supporters in my little
wait a minute
example here.
Oh, okay.
Oh wait, no, they're not.
You're thinking that's the band. The band.
Yeah. Sorry, so I'm confusing my own theory here. Anyway, I do have a satirical article I'm going to post on the show notes page. It's from the Babylon Bee. Are you familiar with the Babylon Bee? It's like The Onion, but more religious.
It's actually fun. It's very much written from a Christian perspective, like a Christian conservative perspective. But in the past couple of years, and maybe it's just me, maybe it's my perspective has changed, but where The Onion has gone full-on crazy lefty social justice warrior, the Babylon Bee is a counter to that, and it is, as a consequence, far funnier.
Right, and it pays pretty good lip service to, free market type things as well.
Absolutely. Like they'll even talk about like Rothbard and Hoppe and, economics in general, and when making fun of like Bernie Sanders and that sort of thing.
Right. So the article I'm going to post is titled Antifa Burns Nazi Manifestos Section on Racism Preserves Remainder as Own Platform.
Yep. Well, wasn't there I'm stretching my brain right now, and that's never a good thing for a podcast. But there's recently somebody went out to like a rally and started shouting stuff from like Hitler's speeches and got like a rousing response. Have you heard, the story?
Yeah, I do recall that. And it was not so much someone shouting, a bit more of a group of people are like listening to somebody orate. And he didn't say it's Hitler stuff, and he avoided a lot of the, racial issues. But yeah, he took literally what Hitler had said in some of his speeches and got all these social justice warrior lefties to applaud him. Yeah. And I think it has to do with the misunderstanding that a lot of people have about that. They think Nazis are right wing and super uber capitalist, and that fascism is all about capitalism. And it's a totally misunderstanding. It's really corporatism and protectionism, mercantilism, and the merger of government colluding with business and directing what that business can and cannot do. It was called National Socialism for a reason, and a lot of people will say, "Oh, that's just a thing that they said to like get popular or something like that." But no, he was literally controlling what the businesses were doing, right? Like highly regulated. They had private owners in pretty much in name only, and so anyway. A lot of people have misunderstanding to that, but really, and Tom Woods had a great talk on this at the Mises Institute a couple months ago, where he just outlined what Hitler's his economics were, and it's almost down the line what democratic socialists want today: more regulation, more government control, more direct control over private property and things like that.
Yeah, and I think some of these Antifa types kind of like latch on to the idea that Hitler opposed communism and saw communism as this great evil, and therefore he was evil because they love communism. But really, Hitler and Stalin, I mean, they had very similar ideologically, and I'm not exactly sure, all the reasons why Hitler opposed Stalin. Maybe because he opposed the church, but I don't think Hitler really gave too much about that either. I'm not exactly sure. Maybe it was more just like a power struggle, but he seemed to oppose it on ideological grounds when in reality, the systems are very, very similar.
Yeah. And to people who would say, well, he was fighting communists and they were fighting him. Well, communists fought each other all the time about whose communism was better, right? That was the whole thing with Pol Pot in Cambodia, Vietnam, and I think even China. Those issues were related to who was going to do communism better or the right way. Right. And there was a lot of antagonism as a result of that. I'm sort of talking about my ass slightly here because I don't totally recall it all. But
no, but yeah, you're right. I mean, as the communists were rising up, and you had Trotsky and Stalin and I forget who else, but there were a bunch of main people and they all kind of had different ideas of what communism meant to them. And, Stalin ended up stabbing everybody else in the back and gaining the political power. And of course, did it wrong, Daniel. So that's why that ended badly.
Right. Just the wrong guy who had totalitarian control.
And really, that's kind of a damning thing on your ideology. If all it takes is one bad guy to screw it all up and turn this otherwise would be wonderful system into a shithole, then it can't be that great.
Right. And we can get more into this in a future episode we should do Lord of the Rings sometime again soon. And I have a guest in mind for that. But it's essentially, the Lord Acton concept of power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely. So even if you do get the right guy in there, that ring of power is going to corrupt them most likely. Right. So it doesn't even really matter who gets in there.
Yeah, you can pretty much count the number of virtuous politicians on one hand throughout all of human history. So chances are.
Yeah, history is a good guide on this one. All right. And one last thing on the Hillary thing. I guess she came out just the other day saying that the time for civility with those you disagree with is over, something along those lines. And it seems really bizarre because it's almost like projection. They're still angry and upset about what happened in the 2016 election because it was, the woman lost a rigged election. How do you do that? But people are still really upset about it. And in my viewing, it appears that most of the vitriol and most of the property destruction and violence is coming from the left and not from people on the right. And most of the claims, well, I don't want to say most, but there are many claims of people on the right doing things that are racist or evil or homophobic or whatever that end up being hoaxes of just attention seekers.
I don't know what you're talking about. Everything I've seen is rioters rioting in self-defense. So I think they smashed Starbucks. I mean, I think those Starbucks windows were oppressing them and assaulting them with their windowness. So I don't know.
Well, Paul Krugman is probably happy because the glazier is going to get more business.
Damn straight. If only we could smash all the windows. Wouldn't that be great? Oh, what a boon.
All right. Let's get back to, sorry to sidetrack everyone there into my delusional theory here. But the director, he grew up in the punk rock scene, like I was talking about. And in one of these interviews, he talks about the concept of the venue giving tickets to the band and telling the band, all right, go sell these tickets, fill the venue. And that's how you're going to get paid. You're going to get a cut of the door. You need to fill up the room. And he viewed that as the venue taking advantage of the band. I want to get your read on that.
Well, first of all, it's really stupid. First of all, it's perfectly voluntary. Now, I don't know the ins and outs of going on a tour, but I imagine you call the venue ahead of time and you negotiate some sort of terms. And when you arrive there, and maybe the terms aren't perfectly negotiated over the phone, and you get there and the venue owner says, hey, I got all these tickets. You know, if you want to go out and beat the street and drum up some business for yourselves, this is something you can do. You don't have to do it, obviously, but it's in your best interests to sell more tickets to your show. I can't imagine that would not make sense to somebody. But I can see if you're feeling like entitled, like, hey, I'm an artist, I'm not a salesman. This is the job of the venue to go out and drum up business. I can see that, but it's not like the venue owner's going, you know, this is something you have to do or else the show's off. I can't imagine that's the case. I imagine it's more like the case of, here's a bunch of tickets. You want to get more people in the venue to make more money, help out, lend a hand. And this is a completely voluntary thing. He's not oppressing you. He's asking you to do something that's probably outside your comfort zone. But guess what, Cupcake? That's what you're going to have to do in life. This is what you do. So I'm sorry you wanted to live the rock and roll glamour lifestyle and going out and walking up to random strangers and being like, hey, you want to come see a punk show tonight isn't in your wheelhouse of skills because you're probably some sort of, you know, angry introvert. But tough titty, man. That's part of the lifestyle. If you don't have to do it. This is a voluntary thing. You could, and even if you get to the show and he goes, okay, you have to do this. First of all, what are you going to do? You can go out there, pretend like you're selling them, walk back in. Yeah, I sold them all. Or you can go, no, I'm not going to do that. And he goes, okay, well then show's off. Everybody's still well within their rights, no matter how you cut it. It's all completely voluntary. Nobody is aggressed against anybody else. So what is the actual complaint?
All right, I think it might need one point of clarification. I think that the tickets are given to them and they get a cut of what they sell as payment for doing the show. So basically, they don't sell any tickets. They're not getting paid to do the show.
Okay. Still, it's a little bit crappy, I suppose. Like they're not going to get any ticket sales. They're not going to get any money from the gate unless they're only getting money from the tickets they sell.
Yeah, I don't know if it's exactly that. I think they just get a portion of the door and they're given a bank of tickets to go and get butts in the seats to make that door bigger. That amount bigger.
Right. So they would get more.
Right. They get a direct benefit from every ticket they sell, but not the entire value of the ticket. The surplus value is carved off by the venue owner and thus the exploitation. So it takes for granted that the venue exists at all.
Right.
That somebody took the time and the financial resources to even have a venue and that they have any incentive to do anything with that venue. They would need some kind of drive, some kind of reason to do it. So yeah, it goes back to the labor theory of value and exploitation, which has been debunked like a million times. But people still cling to it, oddly, thinking that, well, just because I did something for a certain amount of time, it's worth that amount of time, whatever that amount of time is worth. You know, it's like this circular garbage reason. And really, if somebody wants to believe in the labor theory of value, then they need to do with their bare hands with found materials that are subject to the tragedy of the commons, because you can't use any capital equipment. You can't use any purchased or acquired raw materials. It's got to be just your bare hands if that's where all value comes from, right?
It's really dumb, and it breaks down instantly when you think about anything. I mean, take a piece of artwork. If Picasso scribbles something on his little piece of paper and there's somebody willing to pay $1 million for it, whereas I spend a lifetime painting one picture, it should be worth exponentially more, right? But it isn't. And everybody knows why. Because there's a huge demand for Picasso's and there's no demand for mine. Sorry. It's just the way it is.
Right. And then how do they account for the change in value for something after it's already been created and that person is long since dead?
Right. There's no more new labor being added to it. So by definition, it shouldn't increase in value.
So, yeah, there you go. And then Rothbard talks about this in one of his lectures, and I'll try to find it. It might be one of the early ones, like one of the intro to Austrian Economics. But he talks about a charming movie that he saw where there was a guy who was kind of isolated, and he was an inventor. And he was always coming up with great ideas. It's just that because he was so isolated, he didn't realize that, like the radio had been invented 30 years prior. So he comes up with this great idea, the radio or the TV or the whatever, but 30 or 40 years after it's already been introduced in the marketplace. So he spends all this time, right? All this labor coming up with this thing, building this thing, and he wants to go out and sell it. And what's it worth at that point?
It's worth $1 bajillion, Daniel.
Of course.
Well, it's funny because, anybody who ascribes the labor theory of value couldn't even come up with a number. They couldn't even answer the question. And what are they going to do? Calculate the number of hours spent, and then what number are they going to attribute value to those hours?
And is a janitor's hours the same as a brain surgeon's hours? Or is it some multiple? And what multiple?
And they couldn't tell you. It's because it's all hogwash and they know it.
Yet they cling to it. Anyway, let's talk just more in general, but specific to the movie. I know that made no sense.
Okay.
Let's talk about just the basic idea of the story. So this ANCOM type band is touring, and they are barely making any money because of situations like this, where they feel like they're being exploited because they have to sell tickets to get a cut of the door. And they only have enough money to get half a tank of gas, and they need a full tank of gas to get to where they're going. So what do? They look up where roller rinks are and go and siphon gas, stealing gas, and just partying to get to the next show. So already you've got people who don't respect property. They're willing to steal from those who may or may not be more fortunate than they are, right? Like, how do they know how well off somebody who's parked at a roller rink are?
They're the bourgeoisie that can afford to roll around at a roller rink, Daniel, on an afternoon. You know they deserve it. Those sons of bitches.
All right, granted, I'll give them that. But yeah, so they're going around stealing, and then they end up didn't a show cancel or something, and they ended up playing at a Mexican restaurant. By the way, I'm drinking a Mexican beer right now, and then when we get to the Skinhead venue, I have a German beer. So we'll be.
Are we turning into the Peaceful Treason podcast? Are you going to give a rating? Are you going to have it a Cerveza of the week?
That's not a half bad idea. I mean, I don't want to
totally ripping them off.
Well, it's only
intellectual property, Daniel.
Intellectual property is forced negative servitude.
Forced negative servitude.
It doesn't roll off the tongue like taxation is theft. But anyway. But yeah, those guys are great guys. But anyway, my wife just randomly got these for me on her latest grocery trip. And the movie, they play in a Mexican restaurant, very, very sadly, right? Because they're playing a punk show to people at lunch eating taquitos and burritos and stuff. And then they go to this Nazi compound out in the wilds of, I think it's Oregon, right?
I believe so, yeah.
And I wasn't sure where they were in the city. I thought initially that it was San Francisco, but then they said they had to go south, and along the way was this compound show. So maybe they were in Seattle.
Yeah, it could be. I don't know. But
with that journalist guy with the faux hawk.
Yeah, right. Somewhere in the Pacific Northwest. I mean, we get treated to a couple shots of them driving around through trees, and it looks fairly around here-ish. I will say that if your goal is to endear your protagonists to the audience, the director of this movie failed miserably with me, because I don't really identify with people who are just going to steal their way around the country. Sorry, I don't know. I believe in private property, man. I mean, I know they believe that they can freely steal from somebody because they need the gas more. and from each to their ability to their need or whatever they say. And then, those people are richer than them, so it's all relative. They're dirt broke, and so therefore those other people have more wealth, so it's okay. Whatever they do to help them sleep at night, I don't know, they come up with whatever kind of ex post facto justification. But if you want to make me like these people, and you kind of need to do that if these are people that I need to be able to root for, because they're people that are likely going to die, and I need to feel something when they die. Failed. He failed hard. What about you? Did you care about these people? Did you cry little big crocodile tears when they started getting axed?
I don't know. It's a weird movie. It's sort of set as being a horror film in a way, but I didn't find that it really fit that mold very well. And
well, I didn't think, let me be fair though, I didn't think that what they did deserved what they got. I'm not going to say that, like, because they stole some gas, I'm glad they got murdered. I'm not saying that.
No, but what you're saying is, like, it's hard for you to really like them.
Right, you want to present them as likable people so that when bad things happen to them, you care. And if you present them as thieving, unlikable, jerk, snot-nosed, pretentious, entitled brats, then I don't really. I'm not gonna cry when you die. Sorry, even if what happens to you is very unjust.
Right, and it is a movie, and we know that in watching it, so we're not like, oh yeah, I hope they really die. No, it's a movie. Anyway, they need to do a show, right, to make money, because stealing gas isn't enough. And so they end up doing this show at this Nazi compound. And they decide to rile up the Nazis by doing a cover song called Fuck You Nazi Scum. Is that the right name of the song?
I don't recall, but it's some kind of anti-Nazi song of some kind.
Right. And they're singing this at a crowd full of skinheads. So they were like kind of being, they were playing to the audience, but to antagonize them, to piss them off, right?
Yeah, they're riling them up.
Yeah, and then events unfold to where they forget their phone in the green room, and they stumble upon a recent murder scene, which was confusing as heck to me. Why this person was murdered, and why it had to be a knife to the brain, and why it was better that she was murdered than some alternative thing were to happen. Did it make sense to you?
Well, as the story unfolds, and I guess this is where the mystery of the mystery movie happens, is we find out why the girl was murdered, and we find out that she was going to run away from what would you call them, like a cult or a group or a whatever. She was going to run away with her boyfriend, who was going to also run away with her and take away some forbidden items that were supposed to have been destroyed, or at least kept with the group. Like they were going to keep them, like there was like a baseball bat, I want to say, that was from a specific crime. Is that what happened? I want to say.
Yeah. It seemed like they were going to escape, and they took the bat maybe as their insurance policy, like, oh, we'll turn this into the police unless you leave us alone, kind of a thing.
Right.
And the bat must have been used in maybe a hate crime of some sort, and so they're all worried about that catching up to them. Yet they're more than willing to try to cover up a hate crime with a bat by murdering people, stabbing them in the head. And then when this band stumbles upon the scene, they are now held hostage and to be dealt with summarily as well. So it's like they're doubling, tripling, quadrupling down on whatever previous crime had happened. In an effort to cover that up, they're going to commit atrocities far worse.
Right. So we're assuming that whatever it was that this bat was used for must have been really, really bad, because they're willing to kill over it and kill more and more people, like a whole bunch of people. Right.
Very messily as well. Like, they've got the dogs going out there to tear them up. And they've got these, the red laces, which are the skinheads who have, I think, killed or committed a violent act in the name of the group. And so they got red bootlaces to signify their, initiation or whatever.
Right. And, my big problem with this kind of a movie, where it's essentially once they're locked in the room, it kind of turns into like this survival horror kind of a movie where, we're given very limited information. We're kind of given the first person perspective of this group, and we know as much as they know, sort of. We're given a few scenes outside where the people are talking, but mostly we're given their perspective and like, oh no, we're trapped in here. We're, given certain information. There's a guy holding a gun on us.
Yeah, in the room.
And man, when the characters make dumb, first of all, they're unlikable from the start for me. And then they make really dumb decisions rashly and quickly, maybe hoping that the audience doesn't really think about it too much. So there's the guy holding the gun on the whole group, and there's a scuffle. There's like, I don't know if the lights go out. Is that what happened? The lights went out, and then there was a scuffle.
Yes.
And they got the gun, and then they got the bullets, and they're holding it on this guy. And then one other guy's like kind of like an MMA kind of guy, like he has some kind of knowledge, and he gets him in like a headlock and like chokes him out. And then Patrick Stewart comes walking by, and he's like,
Jean-Luc Picard, he says,
yeah,
engage.
he's like, number one, number two. And he's like, I need that gun. I can't have a gun in that room with you. And they basically go, okay, well, I'm just going to give you this gun back then.
Yeah, Chekhov gives him the gun. This is like Star Trek, the theft generation.
When the gun is the only thing that is kind of equally keeping them safe. Like it's the equalizer. They call guns the equalizers for a reason. There's a very one-sided power dynamic if you are not armed. They got who knows how many guns, dogs. You way outnumber these people. This one gun is keeping you, at least it's promising to harm anybody that would come in to do them harm. And they just like, well, okay, as a sign of good faith, I'm going to give you this gun.
The only leverage they had.
The only leverage. And of course, immediately upon opening the door, like a moron, sticks his hand out with the gun. And then the hand gets like chopped up. And he's like, oh no, I immediately regret my dumb decision. And he's like, oh no. And he's pulling the gun and he's trying to pull his arm back. And he pulls it back in like his hand is like hanging from a thread and it's all chopped up. And so what do? They're just like going to grab some duct tape and wrap his arm together. And it doesn't bleed, even though it's probably severed who knows how many arteries, and it should be pumping out. And he should bleed out within minutes. But he's like fine for the whole rest of the movie.
Yeah. The Chekhov would have lost an arm, but the miracle of miracles of duct tape saved his life. So Saint MacGyver would be very proud.
Yeah. So I guess our negotiator friend would have been totally on board with this strategy of being like, oh yeah, I'm going to negotiate with people who have fully demonstrated the fact that they are ready to initiate violence against me.
Well, they wouldn't lie.
Well, why would they lie? They not only have they threatened to kill me, but they wouldn't lie to me too. That just seems like a bridge too far. You're dealing with people who have fully demonstrated that they are willing to kill you. Why would you negotiate with them in good faith? How stupid are you? So when they do that sort of thing and then they pay for it, I'm like, good. You're a moron. You deserve to get killed, you stupid idiot. But it's bad because Chekhov, he kind of does it without like checking with the whole group. Like, hey, I'm going to give our gun away. Is that cool with everybody? He just does it. He kind of takes it upon himself because he's holding it. So he's doomed everybody else to get murdered because he's a moron. Not that they deserve to die, but just when they do stuff like that, it just makes me hate them.
Yeah, it was a very, very, very poor move. I got to say that they did maintain tension throughout this entire movie. Like I did feel like I was on edge, and the injuries were gratuitous. Like they were like that arm was like really torn up, falling apart, and they did not shy away from showing like as gross as you could make it.
Right, like it was an arm that it was hacked at with machetes. It looked pretty bad.
Yeah, if you haven't seen this movie, just be forewarned. I'm not trying to do a trigger warning. I'm just trying to let you know that if you're eating or something like that, you might not be hungry after that scene.
Yeah, it's pretty gruesome. And it's probably the only scene. I mean, there is dogs attacking people. There are gunshot wounds, murders, that sort of thing, stabbings. Yeah, but that is the most, that's their one big special effects prop shot of this arm getting mauled.
Right. All right. So let's move the movie along a little bit. So they end up giving up the gun, and then they barricade the door to prevent the red laces from coming in and murdering them all. And they try to escape, and they dig through the floor and find the drug den or the drug manufacturing facility, but there's no way out of that either. And eventually...
Which begs... Oh, that's right. No, there was a hatch, which you could get in and out of. That's right. Never mind. Go ahead.
But it was locked from the outside.
Right.
Right. And then for whatever reason, people leave the door unguarded or whatever. And so these guys can like attempt to escape. But they're surrounded. Dogs get sent in, and as people try to get away, dogs like chewing on their throats, or if they try to climb out of a window, people immediately stab them. One of the women got shot right away and then mauled by a dog. So it really just becomes, like you were saying, like a survival horror situation, like almost like Hostel or Saw.
Yeah, yeah. Although, I mean, it becomes kind of an even fight, even though it shouldn't be. It should be like world's most one-sided fist fights, but which is a hilarious Adult Swim sketch, by the way, Robot Chicken. But luckily for these stupid protagonists, Jean-Luc Picard is stupid too, because he's like, well, I'm just going to send in like the dog guy. And then when he gets a couple of his dogs killed, and then they put like the microphone on, so then the dogs run away because they don't like the high-pitched sound. Then he's like, well, okay, now I'll send like 2 guys, but let's not just all go and just like everybody have their guns and whatever. We're just going to send a couple of guys at a time.
Well, he's like, send an away team, a guy with a red shirt, right? Because, he's always going to get killed.
Right.
Beam him down into the green room. And then, the guys are able to defend themselves a little bit. They get their hands on some other guns. And
he's full-on Bond villain where he's just like, what? I'm sending in 1 guy. What? I mean, I'm going to assume everything's going to go well. Why wouldn't I?
I expect you to die.
So then, our heroes kill with whatever ramshackle stuff they have. There's one scene where, they've got one girl that resents almost being killed, and she kind of turns one of these guys that he sends in with them, turns them. All right, so he's going to help out, but then he immediately dies. And then I guess there's one kind of clever thing that the heroes do where one girl hides in the couch and the other one pretends to be a skinhead, and they like mark up their faces with black tip marker for some reason. I don't know. Was that like a camouflage move or whatever?
Yeah, that was the story he tells where he's like paintball against actually trained military people and then just wiping the floor with his team because they're, calling like maneuvers and like using strategies, and his team would always lose. And then he said, finally, the guy get fed up. He's like, fuck this. This isn't fun anymore. So he just like goes rogue, just goes crazy, runs out Rambo style and takes out all the military guys because it's totally unexpected from what they're trained for. And so that becomes his strategy for escaping this situation, is to act super weird and crazy and throw off the aggressors here.
Right. And I give them some props for that. I thought that was pretty good because I had a real life experience where I played some paintball in a wooded area with about 20 people. And the first couple games went poorly, not great, but sometimes I think we won 1, we lost 1, but it was basically 2 teams that were fairly equally matched. And we would get down to like a couple guys versus a couple other guys. And then eventually there would be a couple guys that would win. But at one point I had to go. And so I'm like, okay, this is my last game. We don't have much time. I got to get out of here. And so the team was just like, well, let's just charge them. And as soon as the bell rang or whatever it was, everybody charged. We just one giant charge, and we obliterated the other team. It wasn't even close. Maybe we lost 1 guy. Maybe. I don't even think we did. It might have been a complete blitz. So yeah, there's something to be said for doing what you would not expect, going on the offensive when they expect you to not do that.
Yeah, and I wonder also if maybe because it was your last game and you knew you had to go, like you were playing with nothing left to lose, like you had that extra gear that you're like, all right, fine, just go balls out all the way.
Right. Yeah, you're trying to win, or you're trying to just see what's going to happen, and you're not just trying not to lose. Whereas I think when the way I was playing earlier in the day, you're like hiding behind a tree, and then you're like firing and having someone cover you as you run to another tree. And you're trying to play smart, but you're not necessarily playing very aggressively. You're undercover the whole time, and you're constantly trying to not get shot, as opposed to you're trying to rush out and shoot the other team. And there is a scene in this movie where they do that. They get a shotgun and they charge out into a superior force, and they lose, I think, 1 or 2 people, but they do take out a couple people and they kind of surprise them.
Yeah, so maybe one decent lesson to draw from this. Where else do you want to take us on this before we get into our final summary and review? Because we've probably got enough content going here.
Okay, good. Because there's not a whole lot to talk about in this movie. The only other question I have is, at any time do the main characters become immoral actors? Because this movie goes from them being the chased rabbits victim people to them kind of turning the tables and going back and actually killing Jean-Luc Picard and his like big lieutenant guys. So they have escaped, and they could just run for it or just get out. They get out to the road and they kill the people that are setting this elaborate, staged accident that they're going to then drag the bodies out to show that it was a big accident and they didn't actually kill anybody.
Yeah, and the irony of that is that it's staged accident of a siphoning gas gone wrong.
Right.
So a callback to the beginning.
Right. And one of the characters actually goes, you're doing it wrong, before he like kills them. I would never do it that way. But then they go on the offensive and go chase down Jean-Luc and his lieutenant guy and kill them. And they still manage to make the protagonists the quote good guys in that scenario, because they get there and they don't just immediately gun them down. They have like Jean-Luc and his lieutenant guy pull their guns first, and like they're about to shoot them before they gun them down.
Right. It's sort of like the Han shot first, Greedo shot first situation.
Right. It's never making your protagonists be the guys that shoot first and like be the bad guys. And it's kind of annoying. I mean, if ever they had like the right to just gun them down, I suppose it would be something like what would happen in this movie. But I was wondering, what do you think? Do you think that at any time were they immoral actors? Did they have an obligation? I don't know if you want to say obligation, but were they ever aggressors? Let's put it that way.
After all that happened to them, it's a tough one, man. I thought it was ballsy for them to go after these guys. And not that they were going to save anyone because all their friends were already dead, but it was more just vengeance, payback. Like they're going to pay for this, and not in a, court system, call the police kind of way. And right. I'm kind of okay with that. And it reminded me of, Josie Outlaw, Josie Wales, the outlaw Josie Wales, that we did a few weeks ago, because that was a similar situation where in the beginning of that film, Josie was one of the Confederate types, the rebels, and the Red Leg Union soldiers had them turn in their guns, that negotiation thing, right? And then they murdered all of those guys except for Josie escaped, or Josie went and saved one guy, and then he ended up dying of his wounds later anyway. But it's just a similar situation where as soon as you are disarmed, you're at their mercy, and that's not a position you want to be in. But back to your question about the whether they became the aggressor at any point. As you said, they did show Jean-Luc turn with his phaser, not set to stun, but set to kill, and get shot as a result. And so I think on a technicality, they were never the aggressor at any point, but they could have maybe had some gray area had Jean-Luc not had his tricorder, or if he had a tricorder instead of a phaser, right? You know how those situations happen where like, oh, we thought it was a gun, but it was a cell phone or a wallet or whatever,
Well, do you think that, they were the agents of justice, that they were carrying out what would rightfully be done?
I felt, yes, definitely. Like there was no question as to what the events that had occurred to them were. It was like they were literally in a war. They were in a, they were about to be murdered situation. A bunch of them were murdered. They know who did it. They saw them do it. It's not like you need to take the facts of the case and go before a judge and have a jury convict these people. No, you were directly involved in this situation. So yeah, I think that you do have a level of street justice that is, not in real life. Like I think that they would get in trouble, right? Had the police like known that they did this, but I don't think that they were morally doing something bad. If you follow what I'm saying, I don't know. Do you disagree?
I see what you're saying. I think we could probably dissect it each little which way and probably come up with arguments for and against, but I think I'm fairly satisfied with your response. There's a fair amount of me attributing my judgments to to somebody who's in the trenches, if you could put it that way. Like me casting my judgment is probably I'm gonna say it's a little less valid than how they themselves would say. So I'm sure they felt perfectly justified throughout. And if I'm going to nitpick with one little thing they do here or there, like, oh, you didn't have to go after them at that point. You could have just left and then gone and called cops or something like that. I would say that, you weren't there, man. You didn't know. You were just watching. You got to sit back and coldly and emotionlessly, judge for yourself whether or not this or that was the right thing to do. But I was actually there. I held my dying friend in my arms and blah, blah, blah. And I tend to give them a little bit more of the benefit of the doubt, because if there's one thing that I believe that an ANCAP type society would be, is a more polite society. I tend to believe that it would be a more civil society, that you wouldn't have legalized violence. I think people would react more harshly when it actually does happen. And the retribution would be more harsh and immediate. And I think we've gotten far more, desensitized to it with it being legalized in this society. So when somebody reacts harshly to violence and, sees it as a war type situation and reacts with quick vengeance and furious anger, I tend to give them the benefit of the doubt.
Right. And I think, generally the standard is once you've eliminated the threat of harm to you, then that's where you're supposed to stop. But in their situation, when they were still in the woods, I mean, if they were found by any of these members, they would have been killed. So they were still on guard the entire time, even if they had chosen to just try to escape. And so, seeking that vengeance, it was still, game on, as far as I'm concerned. Like if they were discovered, they would have been attacked.
Right. They didn't know what the numbers were, what the odds were against them. I mean, for all they knew, there were 50 people out to kill them. I mean, he eliminated it down to just the red laces, but they didn't know that. When they walked into that club, there was probably 100 people in that club. And probably not every one of them was going to try and kill them, but how do you know? They're locked in this little green room. So give them the benefit of the doubt.
All right. I will agree. All right. So before we get into the final summary and review, there is one thing that we often talk about when we're discussing an older movie. We're like, could they do this today? Well, this movie isn't that old. And Picard does say the N-word a few times. And it's a relatively recent movie. And Papa John, he said it in reference to, well, this other guy said this word. So, why the double standard? And he got fired or had to step down. And then I think some other situation happened maybe at Netflix with an executive, similar thing where they were talking about what's permissible to say. And he was like asking literally the question, is it permissible to say word X? And they said, you just said word X, you're fired.
Well, I don't know if they had the left cover that, if you remember the movie Django Unchained, I believe Leonardo DiCaprio said that word probably about 100 times in that movie.
Oh, yeah. Candyman or Candy, what's his name?
Candyland, Mr. Senior Candy or Mr. Candy, whatever his name is.
Right.
So, yeah, I think if you are of a certain thing, or, I don't know if there's ever been an actor in a movie who's gotten, destroyed about it. But apparently, did you hear about the racer the car driver racer guy who in 1980 said it in an interview, and then it got discovered recently, and his son, not him, but his son lost all his sponsorships because of it?
Vaguely familiar. I mean, from the Flowing Locks that I should be a NASCAR fan, but I am not. But I do think that I heard something along those lines, yes. And it is bizarre, right? It's totally guilt by association and digging back 30, 40 years into something that at the time, it was probably a bad thing to say, but it wasn't as bad then as it apparently is now, right? Like it somehow has changed.
Yeah, the culture seems to change and judge the past super, super harshly. And unless unless you're in a movie, you're doing a period piece, you're playing a bad guy, I don't know. I don't know what the rules are. If people knew the rules, there wouldn't be an outrage mob on the internets like 24/7. I don't think anybody knows the rules, Daniel.
All right. Well, I think that's enough on this, unless you've got any final points before we get into the summary and review. And I'll let you start first.
Well, I'll wrap my last idea into my final summary and review. So this movie has some pretty decent acting, I guess. It has a decent premise to it. But this movie with a kind of movie like this, you have to care about the characters. So when they die off, it's like it hits you. You feel something. But this movie, it throws a bunch of characters at you, and then they die really quickly and kind of off screen almost. So maybe they're cutting out some of the gore so it would get a better rating. I don't know. But it really didn't even if I liked the characters, it didn't let me really experience their deaths, because it all just kind of happens really quickly and suddenly, and then we don't have anybody else react to it. We're never given a scene where, there's a girl character who's upset and traumatized over the initial stabbing of the girl in the head, and she's upset. But I don't recall a scene where any of the main characters die and, someone's just forlorn, heart rot, destroyed over, their friend just being killed. There's no scene we're in Saving Private Ryan where you're cradling the arm, this dead body of this person, you cared so much about like your brother in arms and you're going to cry and die. It's just like, oh, well, he's dead. Moving on. I don't think if you're going to act that way like a robot and you're not going to express any kind of human emotion, then the audience isn't going to care about you when you die. So I think the director or the writer missed a trick where he treated it like it was a horror movie and where these people are just dying in like gore. He substituted gore for actual human emotion. And that's just a recipe for a movie that no one's going to give a shit about. And there is good tension because there is an injustice happening. And my sense of justice kicks in when you've got these, this vastly outweighed power dynamic, which is good. You got this very weak set of protagonists against this very powerful group of enemies. Good. You got a great setup for a movie. But, then as the main characters start to die, the remaining characters get like this plot armor. Can't have nobody survive. And I had pretty much figured it out that there were going to be two survivors because you had to have some kind of dialogue going back and forth between the two. So once it got down to two and the movie went on for another 20 minutes or so after that, all the tension for me had just evaporated. And I was like, well, there was good tension for a while and then it was gone. And I didn't even like the characters. So yeah, this movie, not good. There are elements that are good. And I want to say that you could make a good movie out of some of these ideas, but just kind of dropped the ball too many times. So for me, this is like a 4. Check it out if you got nothing better to watch. But with the options today between Amazon and Netflix and Redbox and TV and everything else, I can't imagine you ever being like, let's watch Green Room. So, Daniel, what did you think?
Well, you're being oppressed with so much choice and exploited with a buffet of opportunity before you.
It's true. I am being totally oppressed.
It could be called down upon with a flick of a finger. Yeah, so this movie, I had a bit more of a favorable viewing of it. I felt that the tension was good. It was like keeping you in a state of what's going on. You're still trying to figure it out kind of as it's unfolding. And there's always the foreboding of, oh, is that about to happen? I think he did really well with that kind of element of it. But you are right that they didn't really develop the characters very well. And we didn't mention this before, but this is Chekhov's final role before he died in that tragic car accident. So this is his last performance. And I think that he did a fairly fine job in this movie, even with the miracle arm that allowed him to not bleed out when several major arteries were severed. I think that miracle duct tape would never have really saved a person's life. And then back to my analogy at the beginning, really the two different groups here, they're really only big difference between the two is that one is overtly racist and the others are sort of like you were saying, and I forget what the term was, but
the soft bigotry of low expectations.
Right. Yeah. You're like, oh, you're so much lesser than me and therefore I need to help you. And I'm going to get virtue signal points for doing so. And they're also the type of people who would support policies very similar to what the other side wants. And these are policies that were implemented with race in mind, such as the minimum wage and license and regulation laws, marriage licenses, things like that. A lot of these do have racial origins that were intended to keep quote unquote inferiors from being in those positions and competing for those jobs and for those things. So it's a method of control through the government. And really, the only big difference between the democratic socialists and the national socialists is the overt versus covert racism and a leader with charisma, apparently. Because really, the economic policies are about identical, and the results are often rather similar as well. So it's really really unfortunate. Anyway, but back to the movie. I think that I'm going to go with a positive review, but still relatively low. 6.2 for Jean-Luc Picard and Chekhov as they go. Warp speed or warp factor 6.2.
As they make it so. Okay, Daniel, well, you promised me one last thing before we sign off on this episode. You said something about a purge of the face beaks.
Yeah, so just yesterday, there was a purge by Facebook, and it appears to be a coordinated effort, and there was a leaked memo from Google. But it was 800 pages, many of them in a liberty, an anarchist bent, like V is for voluntary, a lot of cop block and cop watch pages. punk rock libertarians, very relevant to this particular movie, right? Because this is a punk rock scene movie, and a bunch of other sites that had hundreds of thousands of likes, like big sites, like not like ours. I mean, we're probably safe for now because ours is so small. Our groups are so small. But yeah, 800 groups, just unpublished, no warning, no nothing. And it's just this, oh, you've repeatedly violated our community standards, or you're trying to juice the stats or whatever. And a lot of people are sort of theorizing that it has to do with the upcoming midterm elections. And it's a way of squashing what they would believe to be anti-left thought or anti-government thought, things like that. And I've even heard some people go so far as to say Facebook is doing this in a proactive sense because Zuck was just in front of Congress testifying, right? And he wants to appear to be doing something to combat fake news and election hacking in a proactive manner, as opposed to having those things imposed from on high upon him. So it's like a face-saving move.
Okay.
Facebook-saving move.
I mean, this sounds like a market force. It sure sounds like, Facebook is announcing itself to be a far-left platform. And that's good market information for its user base. Now, I am definitely of the mind that, and everybody knows this is like the standard talking point, and everybody sniffs and scoffs whenever it gets said, but I don't care. They are absolutely a private company, and they can host or not host whatever they want. And they can do it for any reason they want. Now, they can also be hypocritical. And we have every right to be upset about their hypocrisy and have every right to whine and complain about it. But that still doesn't change anything. I mean, what are you going to do? Are you going to go grab a gun and go to Facebook's headquarters and be like, you have to blah, blah, blah? Are you going to talk to government and be like, yo, government, you need to regulate these Facebook people because they're not doing what I want them to? No, this is just an incentive for you to get on other platforms. And it really annoys me when people say that Facebook is a monopoly. It's absolutely not. It's one of literally hundreds of social media platforms. It's probably the biggest now, but once upon a time, MySpace was the biggest. And probably before that, like GeoCities or whatever was bigger than that back in the day. And who knows how long Facebook has.
You've got mail, AOL.
Yeah. And once upon AOL, they were the internet company that bought like Time Warner. I mean, who knew? And who knows how long Facebook has? And this kind of thing is, going to contribute to the death of it. Now, I agree that, it's probably not great that they're censoring stuff that I would appreciate, not, kind of like ginning up the game for the midterm election. But I also don't think that political action is the way to freedom. Begging your masters for more freedom doesn't make any sense whatsoever. And incrementalism doesn't. If you could vote your way to freedom, well, we probably would have had freedom a long time ago. But that's not how that works. So yeah, it's not great, but the solution is to complain about it, to expose Facebook as a bunch of hypocrites, to say that, you claim to be this open platform when clearly you're not. It's not. What it isn't is to whine to government, to say that this needs to be regulated. We need to treat these people like platforms or, utilities or something like that because they're a monopoly, or this is mandatory. Everybody has a right to Facebook. No, you don't. You don't have a right to Facebook. You don't have a right to the internet. You're talking about other people's labor. You don't have a right to that. And I know my audience knows all this crap, but I feel like even libertarians will talk about this and say like, Facebook needs to be doing a better job. No, we just need to leave and go to other things. There are Minds. There's probably 1,000 other ones. There's Steemit. There's all kinds of different other things that are far more free speech oriented, I guess you could say. So put your money where your mouth is. Support, who deserves your support. Do you think Facebook and Zuckerberg are deserving of your support? Doesn't seem like it. I mean, they provide a great service, but if they're going to shut you down at the drop of a hat to suit their own political agenda, do you really want to support that? It's up to you, man. You're the market.
And if you'd like to support us, we've got a nice little Patreon page that you can visit at lastnighters.com/Patreon. And you can get all sorts of bonus features, including watching us do our live stream, which we're recording right now because, it's so meta, right? Talking about the live stream on the live stream. So lastnighters.com/Patreon. But let's wind this down and we can do some Kathleen Turner Overdrive. That is one of the bonuses our Patreon people get. So before we do that, though, Robert, I think we were deciding on a movie to do next, and I was leaning towards Swingers to be the next episode.
The next episode. Okay. I don't remember the Swingers movie being anything but a couple of guys wanting to get laid, but all right.
Plenty to talk about there. All right. Well, this has been The Last Nighters. I do appreciate you guys joining us. This is episode 41. You can find the show notes and more at lastnighters.com/41. And just a reminder that The Last Nighters are part of the Launchpad Media, where they're always launching new ideas in your direction. So do check out thelaunchpadmedia.com. There are a bunch of other shows, tons of content, new stuff coming out every day. Well worth a visit. Get all your needs for entertainment from a libertarian and culture aspect at the Launchpad Media. So I'm overselling it here at the end of The Last Nighters. Robert, the final word.
Thanks for listening, everybody. We appreciate each and every ear hole that our, I'm just going to say, voices go into, that we struggle and we fight and we claw and we somehow get a show to you each week, despite all the technological challenges that we impose upon ourselves for being old men. And yeah, catch us next time. We'll be talking about some Swingers. Go back and watch that movie. Maybe it's good. Who knows?
All right, and we'll continue the transmission for a few more minutes on the actual Anarchy show. This is episode 98 of the show, and you can support us on Patreon for Actual Anarchy at actualanarchy.com/Patreon. And we have some wonderful supporters watching us do the live stream right now. Various levels, you get various good things. But Robert, your take on the episode here on Green Room. One thing I wanted to add before you answer is I felt like the name of this movie and the marketing of it, like the imagery that was used and even the description of it, just didn't draw me. You know, it seemed like it wasn't positioned very well in a market sense. Like I wasn't drawn to this. It seemed very low budgety. Just from, I thought it was gonna be like a low budget, low grade horror movie based on the marketing.
And wasn't it?
Well, it wasn't really horror, right? It was more just high tension, like violence is going to happen to these people.
Well, I mean, if you're on the left, you think that Nazis are everywhere and they're out to get you and they're going to take over. And that's the scariest thing in the world. So, I mean, if you're convinced that Donald Trump dog whistles to Nazis and Charlottesville was just the tip of the iceberg of the white nationalist takeover of the world, and everybody from North Carolina is a Nazi in the KKK, then this movie's terrifying.
Okay, well, that's I can see that, though I don't think that when this movie was penned and filmed and released that was the lay of the land. In April of 2016, the election was in November, and this was probably made in the preceding 18 months, right?
Okay, so you're saying that Donald Trump exposed the super racist half of the country, and then before that, it wasn't known that everybody was racist in the country.
I'm saying that it wasn't like the narrative that it is now.
Right. No, it's definitely become the narrative for sure since the election. But they started when they first called it a white lash. The election of Donald Trump was a white lash. Then you knew we were going down a dark road.
Oh man, that has like so many different meanings, doesn't it?
Maybe. I don't know.
Well, because you got backlash, right, which is what they're sort of alluding to. But then a white lash is like a person with a whip, yeah? Lashing a whip.
Yeah, lashing the slaves back where they belong, right?
Oh, boy. Oh, boy.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you're just kidding. Just kidding, making a joke.
I don't know. I've got white skin. I don't know what to tell you. I'm secretly a Nazi, of course.
Making a joke. But apparently, you can't be funny anymore, because that is not PC. Mel Brooks actually talked about this in an interview maybe a year or two ago, how he made Blazing Saddles and Spaceballs and all sorts of great irreverent movies that relied heavily on non-PC humor. And he was bemoaning how you couldn't do a lot of those things today. It's one of the things we talk about often. So I'll post that on our show notes page for this episode, because I think it's pretty relevant. I think that a lot of comedy has died as a result of the SJW virtue signal oppression Olympics. And it's a really sad thing to see.
Absolutely. Yeah. If you're not allowed to go where your mind is telling you this is funny, because you're afraid of offending somebody, then you've already lost. Because comedy, by its very nature, is true and something, maybe painful, something wrong, but something true. Ultimately, that's why, you laugh at it. And if you're not allowing yourself to do that because you're afraid of offending somebody, and guess what? The truth can offend people. It will offend people. Then how dare you call yourself a comedian? But I understand why people kowtow to it, because that is essentially the dominant culture, and it's so much more lucrative to go along with it than it is to fight it.
Yeah, it's kind of a perverse incentive, right? And it's kind of unfortunate. You get rewarded by playing along with these virtue signals, and it's further reinforced and incentivized, and you get punished for any wrong think, and that is it doesn't bode well, because little by little, inch by inch, you end up going more towards totalitarianism as a result of all of this.
Yeah, as you become more and more intolerant of different ideas.
Well, preaching tolerance.
Right. By preaching tolerance, you become more and more intolerant and more authoritarian. That's exactly what you are. Growing up a lefty, I didn't see myself as an authoritarian. As I was a statist, I was, but I was very much like a laissez-faire. Like, I appreciated the lack of war, the lack of, getting out of people's bedrooms. Hey, let people do what they want to do. It's not my business. But this left is very much, hey, you said a wrong thing. You shouldn't do that. You're bad. You're bad. You're a bad man with a bad mouth.
You should not be allowed to have a career.
Yeah, get him out of here. Destroy that person. Fire him. He's a bad think man. Bad. It's like, how do these people call themselves liberals? In the classical sense, I don't even.
Not even
I can't
the classical
even
sense. More in the 80s vintage sense. The 80s and 90s vintage.
Right. Get the people out of people's bedrooms when the religious right were complaining about the gays and the decay of the morals of society, and then the left was like, hey man, let them do what they want. It's none of your business.
Right. And the left was always pushing the envelope on what you could say, how raunchy you could be, how daring you could be in media and entertainment.
Yeah.
And now it's totally folded over itself. It's so bizarre. So bizarre.
How bizarre.
Oh, you're taking me back. All right. Well, let's end this and maybe continue the conversation a little bit in the paid area behind the golden ropes of our Patreon supporting members. And so if you want a piece of that action for the affectionately called Kathleen Turner Overdrive, and I'll give a prize to whoever can point to me on our Facebook page. Ironically, that we just talked about how if you support Facebook, you shouldn't. If you don't support Facebook, you shouldn't use it. We're still using it anyway. We're hypocrites ourselves. But if somebody comments down below this post, where this show is posted on our Actual Anarchy Facebook page, with where Kathleen Turner Overdrive comes from, I'll send you a prize. Fair enough? Good deal? All right. Well, that'll do it for us for Actual Anarchy, episode 98, and the show notes and more can be found at actualanarchy.com/98. Thank you very much. Maximum freedom, everyone. Good night.
The Chipmunks. CHIPMUNK. We're the Chipmunks. Guaranteed to brighten your day. Do 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 do.